You've been walking this path for months, maybe years, and lately, something feels different. Not louder, not heavier, almost suspiciously still. And now you're asking yourself, did you actually make it through? Or did the whole awakening just quietly dissolve, leaving you right back where you started, wondering what any of it was for? That question isn't a sign of failure. It's actually the first clue that something fundamental has shifted. Because the spiritual world talks endlessly about the beginning, the sleepless nights, the ego collapse, the feeling that your entire identity is burning down. But almost no one discusses what it looks like when the fire finally burns out, when the storm passes, and more critically, how to recognize that moment when it's happening to you. Carl Jung mapped this territory for decades. He called it individuation, the slow, often brutal process of becoming the person you actually are beneath every coping mechanism and social mask you ever built just to survive. And what Jung found waiting at the far end of that road. Almost no one expects it. We'll get there. But first, sign number 5 on this list directly contradicts almost everything the self-help industry has drilled into you for years, and it might genuinely reframe your entire spiritual journey. So stay with me until we reach that one. Here are 7 signs your spiritual awakening is truly complete. Sign 1. You've stopped needing to be right. Think back to who you were before this started. Honestly, for most people, being right wasn't just a preference. It was armor, a way to prove you existed, that your voice mattered, that you weren't invisible. Being right was never the goal. Safety was. Jung described the ego as the part of us that builds its entire sense of stability on outside approval. And here's what surprises people. Early awakening doesn't dissolve that ego. It just gives it a spiritual upgrade. Now, you don't need to be right about politics or money. You need to be right about consciousness, about who's awake and who's still asleep. But when the awakening genuinely finishes its first major cycle, something shifts that you cannot fake. You stop needing the argument to go your way, not because you've gone passive or indifferent, but because you no longer require someone else's agreement to feel solid inside. You can sit across from a person who completely disagrees with you, listen with real curiosity, and walk away with your inner world entirely unshaken. That kind of groundedness, one of the rarest freedoms a human can ever reach. Sign 2. Ordinary moments start to feel beautiful. This one is so subtle, most people dismiss it, which is exactly why it matters. The moment you genuinely enjoy a quiet Tuesday morning with nothing special happening, something profound has already occurred inside you, whether you've labeled it or not. The seeker's mind is always aimed at the extraordinary. Peak experiences, synchronicities, signs from the universe. Because seeking itself becomes a way to avoid the present moment, which so often feels plain and unremarkable by comparison. Jung wrote about the persona, the version of ourselves we perform for others, versus the deeper self, which he insisted is always located right here in the actual texture of real life, as it is, not as we wish it would be. When your nervous system finally relaxes enough that the present moment feels like enough, when you genuinely laugh at something small, when you notice afternoon light changing across a wall and feel moved by it, without needing to photograph it or explain it to anyone, that is not a small thing, that is integration. Sign 3. Loneliness stops scaring you. The loneliness that follows early spiritual awakening is one of the most painful and least discussed parts of the entire process. That feeling that you've outgrown your old world but haven't yet found the new one. The strange grief of realizing people you love can't follow you where you're going. That loneliness was real, and it deserved to be honored, not bypassed, not spiritually reframed before you were ready. You were losing the identity that once held your entire life together. But when the cycle matures, something changes. The loneliness may not disappear completely, but it stops being something you need to escape from because you've developed a relationship with yourself that is stable, warm, and honest. The kind of relationship that doesn't require constant company to feel whole. Jung believed the most important relationship any human can cultivate is with their own unconscious, the unseen, rejected parts of themselves that were never welcomed. And when that inner relationship is healthy, solitude stops feeling like abandonment. It starts feeling like coming home. You can spend an entire evening alone and feel genuinely at ease, not numb, not performing contentment, actually okay with your own company. Most people never reach that place. Solitude only hurts when you haven't befriended yourself. Sign 4. Silence becomes familiar. For most of your life, silence was probably something you filled as fast as possible. Music, scrolling, conversation, anything to keep the noise going. Because silence had a way of surfacing everything you weren't ready to face. All the unprocessed emotions and unasked questions you stayed too busy to feel. Here's what surprises people. Early awakening actually amplifies this discomfort with silence. The more aware you become, the louder unresolved material gets when nothing drowns it out. That's why so many people in early stages report feeling more anxious, not less. But when the cycle turns, silence starts to feel different in your body. You notice you no longer reach for your phone the second you're alone with your thoughts. You can sit in a room with nothing playing and feel genuinely present rather than restless. Jung described this as direct contact with the deeper self, the part of you that exists beneath the ego's constant chatter, and he believed that contact is only possible in the absence of relentless external noise. Silence isn't emptiness. It never was. It's the fullest state a human can inhabit once they stop being afraid of what lives there. Sign 5. The drive to constantly improve yourself fades. Okay, here it is, the one I promised you. Sit with this, because it goes against almost everything the personal development world has ever told you. We live in a culture that has turned growth into a permanent emergency. There's always another habit to build, another trauma to heal, another level to unlock. And the spiritual community has created its own version of that same pressure, just wrapped in prettier language. Jung had the concept of the shadow, the unconscious collection of every part of yourself you've rejected or been told is unacceptable. And he believed most self-improvement is actually just another form of shadow rejection, the ego trying to fix itself into something more acceptable, rather than genuinely integrating what it's afraid to see. When the awakening cycle matures, something genuinely radical begins to happen. You start to feel that you are fundamentally okay as you are, right now. Not because you've achieved some perfect state, but because you've stopped treating yourself like something broken that needs to be fixed before it earns the right to rest. Growth continues, but it stops being driven by the quiet terror that you're not enough yet. And honestly, that's when real growth actually begins. Sign 6. Criticism lands softly. There was probably a time when one critical comment from the right person could send you into a spiral that lasted days, replaying it, dissecting it, defending yourself in your head against someone who had already moved on and forgotten they even spoke. That sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was a sign of how hard your nervous system was working to protect a core wound. The belief that your worth is determined entirely by how others perceive you. Jung called this the persona wound, the damage that happens when you spend so long performing an acceptable version of yourself that you begin to believe the performance is all you are, which means any criticism of the performance feels like an attack on your entire existence. When the awakening cycle integrates, something genuinely changes in how criticism hits your body. You can hear negative feedback, even unfair or unkind feedback, and process it without your whole inner world collapsing around it. because you've built a relationship with yourself that is solid enough to absorb the impact without shattering. The sting may still come. That's human. But it passes in minutes instead of days. And you no longer need to convince the other person they were wrong to feel okay again. Your sense of who you are no longer depends on their verdict. Sign 7. You do things with zero audience. This is the one I told you to wait for. And from the outside, it doesn't look dramatic at all. It just looks like someone baking bread at midnight, dancing alone in their kitchen, writing something they know with absolute certainty no one will ever read. We live in an era where almost everything we do has a potential audience attached, where the line between genuine experience and performance has become so blurred that many people have lost the ability to do something purely for the love of it, without at least part of their brain already composing the caption in the background. Jung spoke extensively about creative expression without external validation being one of the most direct pathways to the deeper self, because the moment you create for an audience, even an imaginary one, you've already started editing yourself into something acceptable rather than something true. When you start doing things purely for the joy of doing them, when you spend an afternoon on something that leaves no trace and feel completely satisfied by that, when you stop needing the experience to be witnessed in order for it to feel real, that is not a quirky personality trait. That is a sign that you have returned to yourself in a way most people spend their entire lives searching for and never quite reaching. Here's what I want you to carry with you after this video ends. None of these 7 signs look like enlightenment from the outside. None of them arrive with a sudden feeling of having finally made it. There's no certificate, no moment where the universe taps you on the shoulder and says, "Well done, you're finished." The completion of an awakening cycle is quiet, almost embarrassingly ordinary, and that is precisely the point, because everything you went through, every dark night, every identity collapse, every relationship that didn't survive the version of you that was emerging, all of it was leading you back to something you were never actually separate from in the first place, yourself. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not the polished version, not the healed version, not the version that has read all the right books and done all the right practices, but the full, unedited, completely human version that contains both the light and the shadow and has made peace with the fact that both belong. These 7 signs aren't finish lines. They're mile markers, proof that you've been doing the work, that something in you has genuinely shifted, that the person hearing this today is not the same person who started this journey. You made it through the fire, and this ordinary, peaceful, surprisingly undramatic moment you're standing in right now, this is what standing on the other side actually looks like. Welcome home. If something in this video made you stop and think, if one of these signs made you whisper, "That's actually me," hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people going through exactly what you just heard about find this video when they need it most. Which of these 7 signs hit you the hardest? And which one do you still feel like you're working toward? Drop it in the comments below. No wrong answers. And you might just say the things someone else needed to read today. If this is the kind of content that makes you think differently about psychology, consciousness, and the deeper mechanics of who we actually are, subscribe to Wines of Thought so you don't miss what's coming next. We're only getting deeper from here.